Alright guys, here we have the Arturia MicroBrute, a 100% analog synthesizer. Really compact, one of the most popular analog synthesizers in the market for its price point. This thing does a lot of really cool stuff and sounds amazing, especially when you factor in how affordable this is. Obviously, being one of the most affordable analog synthesizers, a lot of guys have this. But one of the most common questions that we get is, how do you program it and how do you get the most out of it? Now, one of the key things about the MicroBrute is that it does not have presets. In our opinion, that's a really good thing because it forces you to make sounds on your own. It forces you to be creative and really utilize the synth's potential and make some new sounds rather than just simply using presets. So the goal of these hopefully short videos is to kind of show you how to use the synth to program some sounds of your own. So in this particular one, we're going to try and make a bass sound, or at least try and make a few variations of a bass sound, and kind of give you a sense of what it's like to use the synth and how the different features over here kind of come together. So let's get cracking. I'm going to just turn down everything. So right now it's at like init, if you will, and there's no sound coming. That's because we're not feeding any of the sound from the oscillator here into the filter section, which is going to the output section over here. This is the envelope, and here are the modulation sections. So we'll talk about this in a sec. Let's just start with this. This is the sound generator, if you will. And there are 4 waveforms that you can use simultaneously. Even though this is a single oscillator synthesizer, you have 4 different waveforms. Let's just turn one up to hear it. So this is a square wave. Again, we're not hearing anything because our VCA is set to envelope. So let me just turn this back to gate, and there you go. You should hear some sound there. So I'm just going through the different octaves to show you what that particular waveform sounds like. This one is a classic sawtooth waveform. So it's got that nice buzzy, rich sound to it. This is a triangle waveform. Pardon my playing, I'm not a keyboard player, so I'm just doing this to give you guys a sense of what it sounds like. But hopefully through this you'll get a sense of how to really use it. So this is the triangle waveform, square waveform, and a sawtooth waveform. Over here we have something called overtone, which is on all the way this side. It basically works as a sub oscillator. So to give you an example of how that works, I'm just going to bring back the sawtooth waveform. That is a sawtooth waveform by itself, and as I was telling you earlier, you can use multiple waveforms together. Now let me mix the sub oscillator with that. That's without. That's with. Obviously adds a lot more body because it basically is playing the same, not the same, a square tooth waveform 1 octave lower than whatever the other waveforms are playing. So it just adds that body and weight to your sound. So we're going to try and make a bass sound now. So as I was talking about this envelope thing earlier, what is the envelope and what does it do? Right now it's in gate mode. I'm going to, for the purpose of this bass sound, use the square wave. I like the square wave for bass sounds. So now the knobs above each of these waveforms modulate or give you a variation of the kind of sound that you can get from these waveforms. So in the case of this is a square waveform, and this adjusts the pulse width, basically the width of the square waveform. So let me just turn this and you can hear it. So that's pretty cool. So let's try and find a spot on in this, basically in the pulse width, which I think we'll use for this. So let's just sweep that one more time. I think I like it somewhere in the middle. It kind of gives a nice rich sound. Let's just go 1 octave lower to see what it sounds like at the lower end. Yeah, sounds a lot more like it. So we've got a waveform that we kind of like. Now next is trying to see what that waveform should do over time in terms of volume. Right now it's in gate mode, so basically what that means is that as long as I hold the note, you'll hear a sound. The moment I let it go, no sound. So on, off, that's it. So while that can be cool for certain kinds of sounds like bass sounds, very staccato type bass sounds, it could be really cool. And the Roland SH101 synth, which is super popular, had that kind of a gate, so it was very cool for those choppy arpeggiated bass lines, and that's really cool if you want to go with that. It has so you get these very nice and crisp notes that you can actually get out of that. But just to show you where the envelope comes into place, I'm going to turn this into envelope mode, and now we don't hear anything because the envelope is down all the way on all of its stages. So if I turn this up, which is the sustained part of the note, which is the kind of volume that the amplifier has while I'm holding the note down. So if you noticed, with this mode, it almost sounds the same as this. That's because there's no release, and I'll just bring that up so you can get a sense of that now. So the release basically determines the amount of time the note takes to decay, right? So for the sake of this drone type bass that I'm kind of gunning for, let's just leave it the way it is, or maybe a little bit of release. Okay, let's stay with that. So we've got a waveform, we've got an envelope that we like. The next thing is we want to shape the sound. Now analog synthesis is very often referred to as subtractive synthesis. What that means is you kind of take away certain frequencies and shape the sound. That's why it got the term subtractive synthesis. So let's kind of get this down. Right now for a bass sound, this is too bright in my opinion. Let me turn the filter down and you'll get to see the filter come into play, which is one of the most important parts of the synthesizer. First I'll hold it all the way down and just do a sweep so you can hear what it sounds like. That sounds really, really cool, doesn't it? So let's find a spot that we think works. Okay, I think that sounds really cool. So let's stay with that particular spot for the, we can give and go one octave lower. Oh, nice, nice. So here's the thing, I like it at this octave, but I also like the big low end that you get in this octave. So how do we kind of get the best of both worlds? That's where we use the sub oscillator. So let me just bring in a bit of that sub oscillator to get a bit of that low end weight. There you go. Nice big fat low end. So really cool, right? Straight away, I'm going to turn this down very slightly. So straight away a sound that I think is eminently usable. So while this sounds nice by itself, let's just take it a little further. I would like a little bit more movement. Right now when I'm holding the note down, there's not as much happening. I'd like a little bit of movement. One of the things that we're going to try, you remember this particular knob that was modulating the waveform? That sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? What if we could get someone to sit and do this all day long? That's where we have something called a low frequency oscillator, which basically does the same thing as this but at a much lower frequency, and you can see this red LED blinking at whatever rate that we set it at. I'm not sure if you're able to see this on camera, but this is blinking in sync with whatever speed that we set it at here. So how do we get this to modulate this? That's where these patch cables come in and add some magic. So here's what we're doing. This is LFO. So we're going to plug the LFO output into what's called the PWM, which is pulse width modulation, which is this particular parameter. So check this out. So now that we plug it in, still no change. But if I turn the amount up, cool, right? So I can now change the speed of the LFO for it to modulate very, very slowly. or I can turn it up to be a little quicker. Check this out. Nice. I like it there. Cool, right? And right now the mod wheel is set to cutting the filter to controlling the filter cutoff. So pretty cool, right? So there you have a nice drone type sub bass that would sound great on any track. This nice rich analog low end. But what if I wanted it to be a little more gritty, a little more edgy? That's where we have got this brute factor. So this is basically like Arturia's version of an analog distortion, but with a few tweaks to give it its own character. So let's push this up a bit to see what happens. And so one of the interesting things at this point is you may not be hearing a significant difference between this, and there is a difference, but it isn't significant. Now, one of the key things is the amount of volume you send from your oscillators into your filter. So let's push the volume even harder into this. So I'm going to take this up all the way. Feel free to turn up the volume, turn down the volume on your headphones. Okay. Now if you drive this, you'll hear a lot more. And I can even turn up the resonance, which is basically boosting the frequency around the cutoff. That's pretty incredible, right? So let's turn down the brute factor a bit before we blow a speaker cone or two. What is that? Turn this down a bit. So really cool, right? So now that we've made this sub bass drone type sound, why don't we just use the same similar sound and try and make it a little more snappy, a little more staccato-ish. So let me turn down the release so we get a little more. Again, pardon my playing, I'm not a keyboard player, but anyway. So now I want a little bit of movement on the cutoff. So I'm going to turn this down and I'm going to set this back to gate. No, actually let me keep it on envelope. And let me get the decay up a bit and take the sustain all the way down. With no sustain, the note will decay, but it will not have any volume as long as I hold the note down. But I want a little bit of magic. So now what we can do is we can set the envelope amount, this envelope, to modulate this parameter. So check this out now. So let me just take that down a bit. That sounds pretty cool. So we have taken a drone type bass sound and converted to this. Cool, right? So one of the cool things, as I was saying, since I was not a keyboard player, thankfully the MicroBrute has something of a step sequencer built right in. So there are 8 slots here for sequences, and you can record your own quite easily. And just to fire up this particular sound, let me just play I've just change this from off to play, and I'm going to fire off the first pattern. So let's see what it sounds like. Cool, right? Really cool. So, and it's easy for you to program your own patterns. So, but this particular video is about making some cool bass sounds. So what I'm going to do is, while this pattern is playing, I'm going to just play with the parameters that we have learned today and see how I can get a, different kinds of tones just out of this. So while with that down. Too much fun, right? So that's about the time we have for this particular episode. In the next one, we'll try and make a different kind of sound. Hopefully this one taught you a few things about the MicroBrute and gave you some idea of what sound design's like. So hope you enjoyed it. Please leave us a comment and send in your feedback of if you'd like to see any more such videos, or if there's any request for a certain kind of sound to be made. We'll probably take that or tackle that in the next episode. Take care. Cheers.